Hi there. I am going to add Alexis Conason, if I could find her. Hi there. Is my ring light too bright? I'll turn it down.
No, it's good, but I couldn't figure out how to get mine working because it's for like the super old iPhone. Can you see my face? Or I think I'm half in the screen.
I can. Yeah.
There we go.
We have like a Brady Bunch situation going on.
Yeah.
So I can like look down and wave, and you can look up and wave. So
I think that's funny, or is it just us?
I think it's just funny to us, but that's okay. I'm sure everybody does this on their first like Instagram live thing. So I'm Jenna Hollenstein, and this is Dr. Alexis Conason.
Hi.
And we are doing this little Instagram live thing for the first time because there is a topic that we've been kind of discussing that was relevant to both of our worlds, and it's sort of an ongoing conversation. And so we thought of having the conversation live with some people watching.
Yeah. So this is exciting. I've never done Instagram live before, so still kind of just trying to get over the technology. But yeah, I'm excited to be talking about this. I think we started having this conversation between the two of us and said, you know what, let's bring in a wider group.
Yeah, and this is the question at hand is really about, is emotional eating always a bad thing? And is it worth kind of digging a little deeper into that to kind of understand the background behind that? I mean, I remember 20 years ago, like as a graduate student in nutrition, hearing about like emotional eating. And for most of the time since then, I've always thought of it in this very negative frame as this kind of like out of control, emotional meaning kind of like mercurial and unstable and sort of scary, and also unrestrained in like a very negative and unfeminine way of relating to food.
Interesting.
You know?
The gender piece as well.
Well, how can I bring up anything without bringing up the gender piece?
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. I had the same background. Like I always thought of emotional eating as something that was really problematic. And I was trained in a very weight-centric setting, working in obesity research and weight management. And, our job was to help people stop emotional eating.
Right.
And it came up again for me recently when I started doing some research as I was preparing to create my online program, the anti-diet plan, and I started reaching out to people and just trying to see like the language that people used around the struggles that they were having with food. And that was a term that came up again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
And people are identifying, and seeking help, not always for binge eating or compulsive overeating, but emotional eating. Like that's the term that really seemed to resonate with people.
Right. And
so it's interesting to see about it.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because just as you're saying that, and as I'm imagining people coming to that term again and again and again to identify as a problem that they would like help with, I'm even wondering if in some ways what they're seeking is a solution to having emotions. Because, I mean, in the 20 years since I became a dietitian, my feelings about those emotional eating, even my own emotional eating, has evolved a lot because, I think I've come to see food and eating as inherently emotional, and that's
Mm-hmm.
one of the beautiful kind of sensual parts of it. And so this sort of pathologizing of emotional eating doesn't take that into account. And yet there is an aspect of emotional eating, or you might even try to change the terminology a little bit, like you talked about emotional overeating.
Wait, say that again. Your connection cut out for a minute.
Okay. Just, even some of the terminology around it, like of emotional eating. I've tried to say something like emotional overeating, with like the idea that it's causing you to eat more than you would like to eat in a certain situation, or eat in a way that causes stress, as opposed to just having an emotional relationship with food. You have another way of referring to it, like unwanted emotional eating or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, it's complicated. And Jenna, by the way, like your connection is going in and out, so I'm catching about every...
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm not sure what's going on there, if it's just for me or for everyone.
Okay.
But yeah, I mean, I think that I do, you bring in a really interesting point, because I think also the pathologization of emotional eating ties in so much with our pathology of pleasure, right? So that food is an enjoyable, pleasurable experience. There's so much shame that gets put on pleasure. So, I do wonder if that plays in a role as well. It's like to enjoy food, to have pleasure in it, to even like lose yourself in the eating experience, that then has to become a problem that we need to fix.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know. It is very interesting, this sort of fear of pleasure, especially the pleasure that women in particular derive from consuming food and placing it in their bodies.
Yeah, and of course, when we think of emotional eating, we tend to think of it as a, feminine kind of problem, right? Like the stereotype that I always think of is like the image of kind of Bridget Jones, like crying into a tub of ice cream after a breakup or whatever, And I think that's often what people associate is like a kind of out of control woman having this overwhelming emotional experience trying to soothe herself with food, and that's something that's really bad.
And then having the sort of backlash emotional experience of feeling guilt and remorse for having eaten in a way that was unrestrained and not according to the formula that she had tried to follow.
Yeah, and that really actually makes me think about what we see really commonly in people who struggle with emotional eating and issues around food, which is kind of this transformation of taking the emotional, like whatever the feelings are, and then eating, and then all of a sudden the problem becomes the food, right?
Yeah.
It kind of transforms from the emotions, which are maybe like more like less acceptable in some way to ourselves and to our culture, and makes us turn it, transform it into something that we're allowed to be upset about, our bodies,
Right. Well, and I have never had a conversation about emotional eating and all of its subtleties and not come to the point of, do you allow yourself, or how comfortable are you in allowing yourself to experience discomfort? Because so often what we categorize as emotional eating is a sort of grasping onto the pleasure of eating, or a diversion from the discomfort of whatever we're going through emotionally.
Yeah. I mean, I completely agree. And I think that it speaks to generally like just the difficulty that we have tolerating discomfort in our culture. And I think we do live in a society, we're kind of taught that like, if there's any bad feelings, like we have to make that go away as quickly as possible, whether it's like take a pill for that, or, do this or do that, or focus on this. And there's so little tolerance for just things not being okay sometimes.
Yeah. I always think of the writing of Pema Chodron, who's the Buddhist American nun who writes these lovely books with titles like The Places That Scare You, or When Things Fall Apart. And she talks about how even at the first little hint of discomfort, we go, push, And I'm also struck by the fact that, you and I both have a mindfulness kind of focus. Is the connection okay right now?
Yep, I'm good.
Yeah. we both have this kind of mindfulness focus, this kind of synchronization of body and mind, and sort of slowing things down, grounding things. And I sort of feel like that is the only thing I know of that helps us figure out when emotional eating is actually a problem, or maybe it's just a reasonable coping mechanism at the moment, or if it's like something that we should work with and see if we could tolerate that discomfort a little bit more to see if there's something to be discovered there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think it's such, I think we started off, like, the idea for the conversation was today, like, is emotional eating a problem? And I think it depends so much. And, there's, I hear some, like, one school of thought that's kind of like, yes, it's always a problem. And I think that school of thought is often related to the idea that if we're emotional eating, then we, might gain weight. And
right.
the worst thing that could possibly happen.
Right.
And then I'm hearing a lot from, like, another perspective of, like, emotional eating is never a problem. It's all just fat phobia, and that's the only reason we're pathologizing it. But I really think that it's somewhere in the middle, and only you can, only each individual can really tell when it's a problem and when it's not.
Yeah.
In terms of, like, how distressing it is, and also, like, what that feels like inside. And, I will say, I think it, and I always tell my clients when I work with people who are, around these issues, like, that nobody's taking away your ability to emotionally eat. You still always have that as a completely valid option. But I think through mindfulness and mindful eating, we can try to transform it from something that feels compulsive and out of control to a choice.
Yes.
And that's where, I think that really can make the differentiation between it feeling problematic and not, like, saying, I am feeling X and I'm feeling overwhelmed by it, and I want to, and I'm choosing to cope with it by eating, versus, finding yourself kind of like having just eaten, like a whole bag of chips and saying, oh my gosh, what happened?
What just happened? Yeah.
So one is we're kind of in like a fugue state almost, and the
yes.
other is a informed decision.
Yeah. Yeah, totally. And I've talked about it in terms of, like, the difference between being on autopilot and the difference between, like, kind of watching yourself with a remote control where you can hit pause,
Yeah.
and you can say, oh, okay, I have options.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
right now, I think that sometimes emotional eating can be eating emotionally in the sense of eating in the presence of very strong emotions could be, in fact, a very useful and generous form of self-care, because it is a form of soothing. It does alter the brain chemistry, to a degree. It does sort of divert our attention a little bit and make us feel cared for, and to always think of it as this, like, evil thing is denying us that choice. Yeah. And I think your point that only the individual really knows is so important, because, neither one of us considers ourselves, like, experts in the field. Like, I think both of us sort of work with people as, like, I have this set of information. I can help you become the expert of, like, when is the right decision in a specific moment to eat the corn nuts, like I do, or to, sit in the shit, as my friend used to say, stay with the discomfort, see what's there, and sort of develop the resilience, but also the confidence and self-trust that comes with seeing that you can stay with it. Mm-hmm. You can come through it. You can gain insight from it and come out the other side. And you can always go back to the corn nuts when you want to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. And, I know we have the shared love of corn nuts. Giant. Yes. Giant Inca corn. Inca corn, so good. But yeah, I couldn't agree more. I think that it's really about, I see, the work that I do is, about helping people tune into what their authentic selves are kind of already telling them. And I think mindfulness is such a powerful tool in that, because, So often people feel so lost from themselves. And I think that, again, is a reflection of like so many years of dieting and disconnection from our body and being at war with ourselves. That we really, the work is not in telling people what to do, or, if you're, have the urge to eat emotionally, go take a bath instead.
Right.
Or
Have a glass of seltzer.
Right. It's like the most idiotic tips that you hear.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say it's just from like the diet magazines, but I hear it from like doctors and psychologists and dietitians.
Dietitians.
Yeah. So, it's just, but it's not about that. Like, you don't have to go pay someone to go tell you to drink a glass of seltzer instead of eating. Like, if it was that simple, we wouldn't be here.
Right.
But it's not. And I think the work is in coming to a place, working through that disconnection that we have developed with ourselves to be able to really tune into what your body is telling you and make peace with yourself. Because that's, I think, when you can hear what's actually going on and when things are problematic or not.
I love what you just said, and it made me think of something I learned when I went to the body image workshop with Fiona Sutherland and Marcy Evans. They talked about, rather than an obesity epidemic, we have an epidemic of disconnection. And it's both a disconnection from our bodies and a disconnection from our emotional states. Not that there's any difference between the two of them, because they are more overlapping than not, I think.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I am completely. And I think we also hear a lot about, I think it's like maybe Bill Gates or someone who says that, the biggest health crisis facing our time is loneliness. I think it's not only, there's the disconnection we feel from each other because, and then we could have a whole other conversation about why that is, but I think there's a lot of reasons. But I think that the loneliness also stems from a disconnection with ourselves. I work with so many people who can't tolerate being alone. And I think it's because of this disconnected, conflicted relationship that we have with ourselves that we're like not good company to ourselves. So it feels completely lonely and isolating to be left alone.
One of the Buddhist teachers that I study, Chogyam Trungpa Rinpoche, wrote something along the lines of, the thing that human beings fear the most is space. And I think that, the awareness of like, oh, here I am, nothing's happening, is like, we don't feel like we have the skills to deal with that.
Yeah.
And so we get the Netflix and the chunky monkey and, the iPad and the TV and everything else, and we just fill in the space.
Yeah, and I think that it's like the fear is also that I think there's the fear that nothing is happening, but there's also the fear of the intense self-hatred that tends to emerge when we quiet. So there's a lot of motivation, if we're going to talk about emotional eating, we really have to talk about like that, the fact that this really works for us. There's a reason that we want to, get away from ourselves all the time. Like, ourselves is not always a pleasant experience. Right.
But also, acknowledging too that allowing ourselves to experience that discomfort actually equips us differently for every other aspect of our lives, right?
Completely. Yeah. I think that when we can tolerate emotional discomfort, we learn the resiliency that we have. And it's amazing. Like, I think we get so afraid. I often give the example of like a child who's scared of the monster under their bed. And we're so scared to look that we create this whole narrative about what that monster is and how terrifying it is and how scary it is. And then when someone comes in and shines the flashlight under the bed and we see what's actually there, it's not nearly as scary as we think it is. And I think that's often true with our emotions, is that we develop such fear around them.
Yeah. I often use a similar analogy just of like letting our emotional states and our discomfort sort of exist in our peripheral vision, but we're like kind of afraid to like look directly at it. So there's power in being able to like turn toward the Jabberwocky, and I've heard people using that phrase, what we resist persists, a lot lately. And I think of that too, and it just, not just persists, but it continues to sort of evolve and become more and more gnarly the more we don't regard it directly.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, it's like the monster, it goes from being whatever it was, the, crumpled shirt under the bed, to this giant, green, scary, terrifying monster.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So you have something coming up, I know, that you want to share with people.
Yeah, yeah. So I have a new program that is just launched today. I'm super excited about it. It's called the Anti-Diet Plan, and it's a 6-week virtual program designed to help people make their way out of diet hell and really, kind of stop feeling like, crap about ourselves and start to reconnect. It's really, I see it as a sense of coming back to ourselves and coming back to our bodies and learning to regain a sense of trust and honor what our bodies are telling us. And, I've been doing this work for close to a little over 8 years now. And I found that I'm telling my clients the same things over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. So I figured I would record myself telling them people the same over and over. And people could get that knowledge and those skills that I think are foundational to changing our relationship with food. So it's available now, theantidietplan.com.
And I've had the opportunity to co-teach Alexis's content with her. So I've been through this program a number of times myself as I've co-led it with her. And I love your approach. I mean, you had me at meditation. I mean, anytime somebody approaches mindful eating with an emphasis on meditation, I think that is a major, major selling point, because that is the foundation that allows us to practice mindfulness. We can't bypass that very important root work. But also the sort of, social commentary and scientific vignettes and practical aspect. I mean, it's such a well-rounded approach to working with, being surrounded by this culture, and how to work with yourself and your body and your mind in an ongoing way throughout your life. Really, it's a lifelong path.
It is a lifelong path. And I think that when we can start to develop skills towards, healing what has also been for many people a lifelong struggle, then we, it doesn't necessarily fix everything, but we have new skills and new tools, and we're, I think of it as like a fork in the road. We're kind of off in a different direction.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. I always talk about it as it's not something that you fix and forget about. It doesn't ever get put up on the shelf. But the way that we think about it and the way that we relate to it goes from feeling distressful, if that's a word, or distressing and like obsession generating, to feeling like self-care oriented and more natural and more like we become more capable of just navigating our own lives and feeling like, not like we're in control, like we've got white knuckles, but like we can see where we are in space and make choices that align with what works for us. And you have all the tools in that curriculum to do that,
Yeah, I hope so. And I think that one of the things that has been so rewarding for me watching as people, as my clients go through this journey, is the space that opens up when we start to let go of diet mentality, and all of a sudden it's like people become alive in a different way where they're like engaging with the world. I have, a few people who have really like gone on to be activists in the area, and and I think that's the point of diet culture, is to keep us like, is it Naomi Wolf who says dieting is the most potent political sedative, of our time. And that's the idea, is like dieting is there to keep us asleep, to keep us from really engaging with the world. So we're focused on, trying to fix ourselves all the time, and we're not out there making us think about things and trying to change things. what we see when people, you know, stop like filling 90% of their brain space with trying to be smaller, and we realize like, hey, our world's pretty messed up and maybe there's something I can do about it.
Yeah. We were talking, Alexis and I were on the corner of 59th and Lex a week ago saying, what if all those women who were just sworn into Congress were so busy thinking about the size of their thighs that they never like got their act together and entered the race, you know? Can you imagine?
Yeah. And think of all the women who would be, you know, president if we, you know, weren't so busy worrying about what we were going to wear to.
I know.
And what fit us. And
what are we capable of?
What are we capable of? I think that is such an amazing and inspiring question to really think about and to work towards fulfilling it. And I think we're capable of so much more than shrinking ourselves and making us small and just trying to confine to what we're, you know, supposed to be. So I think we're really seeing like a lot of women breaking out of that mold, and it's so amazing.
But it's a path.
It's
a bumpy ass path.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that's like a picture of the path, and it's like all,
yes,
you know, all over the place.
We want it to look like this, and it looks like
right
all over. Yes. Absolutely.
Yeah, that's what the path looks like. So I really think that the first step on that path is recognizing the problems with dieting and recognizing that diets don't work, because that is what keeps us stuck in the diet cycle. And then, you know, learning all of the tools of when we're not dieting, then what do we do? So I'm holding a free training tomorrow, if anyone would like to join me, tomorrow at 12 p.m. Eastern time, Friday. On why diets don't work and what you can do instead. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. We had the first one, I did the training today. It was on point. I forgot to hit record, of course. So
yes.
Recording, if anyone signed up for the replay, you'll be getting that for tomorrow's session. But it was really a great session. We had some good questions. We, you know, it just is really, so meaningful seeing people take these first steps on the journey.
I know. It is really powerful. And I feel like we benefit indirectly then from them going out and being who they are.
Well, I think the whole, you know, I think the whole world benefits. And one of the things
totally
a lot about recently is how, you know, when we heal our relationship with food, it's not just us that we're helping, but we are also working to transform the narrative for generations to come. And, you know, I know as a parent, you know, we think about this more and more, it becomes more and more relevant. And, you know, I know that diet culture was passed down to me. I think many, many women can vividly remember how our mothers felt about their bodies and, you know, the kinds of stories around what a woman's body should be and what eating should be. And we don't want that for our kids. So I think one of the most powerful things we can do is to, you know, transform that to ourselves. And I think there's so much benefit to the world in terms of what we open up and become capable of, to our children in terms of what they become capable of when they're not preoccupied with feeling not good enough about their body. It's pretty
well, and unfortunately, it's not enough to just not want to pass it down, and to think that we're not displaying evidence of our own sort of, you know, broken relationship with our bodies. We actually have to take those actions and transform and work with what is actually going on. Be where we are, even if it is not pretty. Because even in modeling that, even in sort of demonstrating, working with, you know, knowing that something's off and continuing to work with it, even if it's never, you know, resolved, even if it's never fully kind of transformed, being in process models something important too.
Oh, definitely. You know, and I love hearing the stories about the changes that I see sometimes in my clients' children's and how children respond to the different way of eating and relating to body that all of a sudden shifts in the home. They notice. Kids get it. They're like...
Right. But it's not through our words.
No.
It's through our actions and what we communicate, like through our bodies.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, what's in our, you know, what our belief system is will seep out to our children as much as we might try to say something different. You know, they know how we feel at the core.
Totally.
Yeah. So
Yeah.
powerful stuff.
So you'll put information on your account about the workshop tomorrow. And
for the workshop, I have the link in my bio. So just go to my page, sign up in the bio, and I would, love to see everyone there. And yeah, come with questions.
Cool. Cool. And for those of you who don't know, I have a new book that came out this week on Tuesday that is very much aligned with this practice of joining, Buddhist philosophy and meditation with an attuned eating, a mindful eating, and an intuitive eating approach. So when Alexis and I met, we realized that we were kind of cut from the same cloth.
Exactly, and I was just thinking, I wish we could we should bundle the book and together, because there's such great resources for people. And
sure.
Everybody, is showing up. Well, I guess people from my feed can see your stuff as well. I was thinking everyone's already familiar with your work, but if you're not familiar with Jenna's work, you have got to check out her new book, Eat to Love. It just came out on Tuesday, and it is amazing. And you've gotten such great feedback from the intuitive eating and mindful eating community. Like, you had a beautiful endorsement from Evelyn. I can never say her last name.
Triple E, yeah.
Love. So, if anyone is interested in intuitive eating and mindful eating, 100% Jenna's book is got to have. #1 bestseller in eating disorders category.
I love that. I'll pay you later for saying that.
Yeah.
So, all right. Well, we got through our first Instagram Live.
We did it. Very few technological difficulties.
I know. All right. Well, let's see if we can save it now. So
fingers crossed. I hope we do better than recording my webinar.
I'll do my best. You do it on your end, and I'll do it on my end.
Okay, I'll try.
All right.
Bye,
Alexis.
everyone. Thanks for joining us.